police fire. This is an executive session for the following purposes pursuant to section 24-6-4024E and 24-6-4024G of the Colorado Revised Statutes for the purposes of determining positions and developing strategy relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation and for consideration of documents protected by the mandatory non-disclosure provisions of the Colorado Public Records Act, all in relation to interviews and discussion of non-finalist applicants for town administrator position. I caution that each participant to confine all discussion to the stated purpose of the executive session and that no formal action may occur in the executive session. At any point in the executive session, any participant believes that the discussion is going outside the proper scope of the executive session, please interrupt the discussion and make an objection.
Are you ready to be the first person?
Okay. Yes. All right. Yes, I'm ready. All right.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us?
I can.
Going.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
Welcome, Mr. Burke. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome to Paonia, Mr. Burke.
Thank you.
Well, I am Mayor Backren, and I'm going to have the rest of the trustees and people on this meeting introduce themselves.
I'll start. I'm Paige Smith, trustee.
Dave Weber, trustee.
Dave Knudsen, trustee.
Thomas Markle, vehicle.
Doing good. Nice to meet you all.
And the other person on the Zoom is our interim town administrator, Leslie Kiesmeyer. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go around and we're going to ask you questions. And then when we have finished, we're going to give you a chance to ask us some questions. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Oh, Josh.
And ones I'll follow with mine.
Okay.
So hoping to start off, what attracted you to this position in the first place?
Yeah. There's probably a lot of different things. My wife and I are originally from Nebraska, but we've been in Colorado for about 6 years, particularly here in the town of Eagle, working for different groups here. And actually, it was kind of recently, I think it was last year, we decided to visit Marble and kind of just keep going. We've got this mission of wanting to visit all small towns in Colorado. I'm from a small town in Nebraska, really small town. So I just love those environments. And Paonia was just, I don't know, it took us by complete surprise how charming it was. And we just love walking the downtown and just all the kind of surrounding area. So just as a place, I think that you could just really feel this sense of community there, which is really nice. And then also, as far as my career goes, I'm kind of ready to kind of take the next step. I've been working pretty hard in the roles I've been in, and I feel like I'm not quite challenged in the ways I want to be challenged in that kind of produce growth. I mean, I am every now and then, but I just feel like I'm capable of more. So I'm kind of just looking and seeing what else is out there. And this position seems really interesting. It was a unique job description, I thought. And yeah, I mean, I had a feeling it would be something to try out. So I kind of go with my gut a lot. And that was probably a lot in this decision.
Please describe your supervisory experience and style.
Yeah, so it's probably a little non-traditional in this sort of role, but as a planner, I've kind of got two things. So one is I am the project manager for land use files of varying sizes and degrees. And that's where I'm kind of it's not quite the same as supervising from a staff level, but you are still managing interpersonal dynamics. You're managing how people work with the applicants, the public coming in, and all that different stuff. So that's really where I've honed my kind of leadership skills and kind of people skills, and is trying to get these files through in a seamless way, in a way that helps and supports the decision makers on these files, because they could be very complex very quickly. You might not even expect it at the beginning of the file. The other thing is I was in charge of our, so when I was working as an associate planner, my kind of subtitle was customer service. And so my main role was working with people that would come in. A lot of times I was kind of called in when there were, difficult or hostile situations or things like that. And so I was also in charge of managing like the front desk folks, like how do we kind of set expectations for, customer service? Like if someone comes in, do we drop what we're doing and that kind of stuff? So it was a lot of working with my manager to figure out like what our priorities are and trying to execute on those. So that's my answer for that.
What can you bring to the role of managing a small town municipal government?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I think, I've I do a lot of observation, and I kind of have seen how different people lead and manage, especially small communities. That's where, like I said, I've grown up, I've been raised, and it's where I've worked for 6 years now. It's also part of my education, so it's kind of in my blood. And I think there oftentimes there's folks who come in who don't have that small town experience, or maybe just not that connection to a small town environment, and they kind of run it like a big city department where it's really structured and here's the way it is and all this stuff. I'm very flexible, like adaptable, because certain situations pop up that you could never expect, and you need to kind of figure out how to deal with them. I've got a lot of experience with that from at the county in the COVID response and all the wildfire stuff that's been going on, and all that. I think that adaptability is just really key, and part of that adaptability means you have to get to a point where you can trust who you're working with, not just within your organization but regional partners. And it takes work to build those relationships, and you don't want to do those when those crisis moments happen. You want to do that over time and make sure you're cultivating that and addressing what they need and trying to do that. It's just like any relationship, really. And so I really do think that I would bring in that level of trust and that level of adaptability that I think I just haven't seen in a lot of other leadership in the organizations I've been in. I did see, and maybe we'll talk about this more later, but I did see that it was mentioned in the application, there's kind of a strife or stuff going on in the town. I am curious about that, but I think that the kinds of ways that I view myself and how I would lead would work well with that kind of environment.
Great. Thank you. Could you please give us an example of a time when you did not agree with the board or your direct managers? How'd you use your position to help find a solution?
That's another great one. You guys have great questions. I most of my experience is through land use. I would say that is my biggest strength. That is the thing I've got like just so much experience in. And there's so many land use decisions where, we offer recommendations as staff and the board may disagree, maybe not always with the full recommendation, but with pieces and chunks and things like that. In general, as a principal, I'm not going to bring my personal bias to a situation as much as I can. I mean, we all do to some degree, right? But I'm always going to keep it professional. Like here is my professional opinion on this thing, and really in a staff report or memo, lay out the logic of that. And it's really kind of the start of a conversation. It's not the end. Like my recommendation or my belief about something isn't going to ever be like, here's what it should be, because there's a role for all of these different entities within the government. And I think really putting something forth to the board is all about, let's get this conversation started. Here's a position. Here's the kind of logic and weight that goes into that. Let's dissect that and figure out, because I've seen so many times in a board hearing, a better solution is reached when there's this robust conversation. Maybe there's another hearing where you have to reschedule and come back with more research on something. And that's why I've learned to just not take these things personally, because everyone in that room cares about the community. And that's really what it comes down to at the end. And I think those kind of personal ego things just don't help anyone.
Thanks.
To me. Okay, Colton, can you give us an example of a time when you made an error which had a large impact and what you did to minimize that impact?
Yeah. So I'll go to land use again. There, you know, there's some pretty intense noticing requirements on these things where, you know, if you have to notice things within a certain time frame in order to get the hearing. And then in our code, in particular, the county, there's just really embedded kind of like process things. So, you know, you have to send it to referral agencies by this time, or you have to do this by this time. And there was one file I had, it was an aggregate recycling facility that was being proposed on it was previously a gravel mining operation. And it was controversial. And the applicant was also under some time pressure because they had a access permit. It's very complex, as these things always are. They had an access permit from a nearby town, and it was expiring at a certain time. And they were trying to rush to get to hearings so that they could at least like be in process for this thing and not have that expire and go through something that was going to be pretty challenging for them. And in all the extra other stuff I was working on with them, I had screwed up a single date on the noticing for when the hearing was. And some neighbors caught wind of it. They saw it and brought it to me. And I immediately, you know, I immediately was like, oh man, I made a mistake. And so we took immediate action to get that thing rescheduled and to, you know, talk to the public, made sure they knew exactly when it was and all that. And also had really robust conversations with the applicant. They were, you know, upset about it, but I had done that work I had talked about of building rapport with them throughout a year, basically, probably more. And so they weren't so upset with me because I was able to explain the situation. I explained, here's what we're going to do about it. And I did it, and we got through, and they got what they wanted. So, you know, it was one of those things that compromised years of work, just with one mistake in the noticing because of the implications that would have on their other stuff. And, you know, you just got to own up to it and figure out how to resolve it and not compound your issues by panicking or, you know, trying to figure out some way to avoid that issue. Just directly address it. And so that's my philosophy on that.
Please describe your experience with managing municipal water and sewer systems.
Yeah. So at the town is where I probably had most of my experience, and it's pretty adjacent. It's not like kind of directly managing those systems, but we worked pretty, I mean, when I was at the town, it was me and the community development director. That was the community development department, basically. And so a lot of my work was coordinating with our public works department, our town engineer, on infrastructure for proposed development. And a lot of that required an understanding of how our existing system worked and what our capacity was and needs like that in order to figure out, like, can we accommodate this development? How much can this grow? Like, we had to know that so that when we presented it to the board, which often it was just us, those other, like the public works director and the town engineer were not there. So we had to learn this enough to be able to represent it to the board in order to help them make a decision about it. So I was very familiar with the system from that point of view, from the infrastructure. I also was reviewing building permits constantly. That was one of my main roles as well. And that requires an understanding of how the timing of taps and, you know, just you learn a lot about the system just through the kind of boots on the ground stuff. And then the other thing is, while I was at the town, there was an issue with the existing water treatment plant because of it was aging and it was far from town, and the town wanted to also have another plant just in case of wildfire or some issue that could compromise the system. And so I got to participate in and sort of just observe how that kind of conversation went and how do we address rate changes and prorate stuff and, you know, just how to deal with out of town service and all those different things, as well as the bonding and financing and stuff. So I got to be a part of a lot of these different things, and I've learned quite a bit through that. I saw Paona's going through a similar thing with its water treatment stuff. So yeah.
Please describe your professional work experience related to project analysis and how you explain your analysis and recommendation to lay people.
That's a great end point, because I think that's something that's often left out of the staff reports that I see, but I've done a lot of that, primarily, like I said, through land use review, but also through policy review related to municipal code and long range planning as well. You know, my general philosophy is, you know, when there's standards to a thing, that's really the core of how you start and end that staff report and presentation is what are the standards and how can we sort of analyze this whole project with that. Obviously, there's always context and project history things that are important, and you know, there's kind of other things that happen that need to influence that decision, but fundamentally it's about those standards, because if you don't use those, you don't really have much of a grounding that everyone can kind of understand. I think predictability is one of the key sort of components of a well-oiled decision-making process when it comes to things that the public is bringing in and trying to get through the process. So when it comes to working with teams on developing these things, it's really about efficiently allocating certain maybe sections of the reports to the people who are the most qualified to do that. I have no problem handing stuff off. I trust the people who are working with me. I mean, I'm really am a team person. And to the layperson thing, it is about they need to know the structure of how the decision-making process works. So when people come in and they have an issue, maybe with the gravel mine that I mentioned earlier, the aggregate recycling, you know, it is about first going to the standards, because they're going to come in and have all these issues that they have with it, which is fair, but they're not going to be as compelling to a board if they don't know what the standards are or how the process works. And so there is an element of making that process really clear in the report and in how you present it. Here are the standards. Here's what's required for this, you know, all that. And then going through your actual logic behind each of those. It could take a bit more time, but I try to be as concise as possible, because that's another thing is, you know, sometimes having all the information doesn't help because it's just so buried with an extent of things. And so I try to really focus on what are the issues that we can kind of predict are going to be there. And, you know, if there's more, let's make sure that we prepare that the next time that we come before the board.
Thank you. Could you please describe your professional work experience with grant writing, grant contract management and reporting? Specifically explain what elements you are directly responsible for.
Yeah, the place where I did the most grant writing and maintenance of those was my time as a recycling coordinator, actually at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, my alma mater. I was responsible for maintaining grants with all kinds of different groups, primarily like environmental sustainability groups within the state, to acquire equipment such as recycling bins or compost equipment, or, you know, establishing relationships with, we started a vermicomposting program, so worm composting, which was pretty cool, but we did that all through grant funding. In addition, we acquired like our box truck and other equipment to also increase our recycling rates. So that was just a lot of, you know, making sure we're meeting the annual reporting requirements, making sure we're checking our figures, developing new ways to track our figures, and, you know, just trying to maintain those relationships and that stream of funding. So that's where I've got the most. I've done here and there grant writing, some stuff for community engagement. I've done primarily with Northwest COG up here, who represents us. And yeah, some other kind of groups, but at the universities where I was pretty consistently in the grant writing space.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can you describe your experience with developing a budget and monitoring that budget throughout the fiscal year?
Yeah. So my experience there is going to be a bit untraditional, but I keep saying that, hopefully it's not a bunch of marks against me, but I do have an undergraduate degree in accounting, and after graduating with that, I did work at Deloitte as an advisory consultant. So it wasn't so much a budgeting, I wasn't developing budgets, but I became very financially literate in kind of analyzing large clients, financial documents and things like that. It is something I'm always interested in. I participate in the audits a lot of times, especially when I was out of town, just kind of curious how those kind of worked and panned out. I do kind of check in with my department leads on the department's budget, what's available, what can I use. And then I guess the most relevant experience to direct budgeting was in the community engagement programs I was working on, where we were getting funding from Northwest COG and other sources, and trying to allocate that into different kind of equity research that we were doing, and swag to give out and all those other things too. So that was kind of allocate. It's really not too complicated in for me to do that. So
Hey, thank you. How have you handled the situation when a person you directly supervise has made a serious mistake?
yeah, so obviously there's some context kind of needed to know what the best course of action is. Is this a repeated thing? Is this what's the nature of the source of the mistake? Is it truly a mistake or an accident, or is it some egregious sort of slapped a member of the public or something like that? Those all would require different approaches. But if I'm the direct supervisor to this person, I would want to talk with them privately and discuss the nature of the mistake, get some context. Maybe there's some stuff going on in their life. That's something that's important to know about, is people's personal lives, and sometimes they need to take some time away and have some space from work, because it's never a good thing if someone's making repeated serious grave mistakes, obviously. And if there's like serious, if it's a slap in the face kind of thing, I mean, there's some disciplinary action that's just absolutely necessary, because it's unacceptable. So I guess, yeah, it kind of depends on the context and what you know of that person already, and kind of what is going on there. But in general, those are my two approaches, I would say.
Thank you. Describe a difficult work situation or project and how you were able to overcome it.
I don't have those. Just kidding. I'm trying to think of one. Yeah, there's one I had. Oh man, this one doesn't have a happy ending necessarily, but I was put on a pretty large affordable housing project near the town of Basalt, which Eagle County has kind of a little chunk of Elgin and Basalt in it. And so we've got a satellite office there basically. And this was the Archdiocese had come in to do this project. They didn't need any county support in terms financially. They just were trying to do this thing in this town, and they were trying to do it at 60% AMI, which was something we had not seen ever happen without county support in that area. And so we were very supportive of it, and we went through an expedited review process, which was something we had to develop on the fly, because basically we had this, it was in our code that affordable housing at this level could get an expedited process, but the process was never spelled out. And we were already pretty stretched in how we reviewed things. So we had to, first of all, develop a way to expedite this review without completely straining our ability to analyze it. And also, the main thing, the reason I'm bringing this one up is it was in a project that was sort of half finished. It wasn't a fully developed, it was kind of a commercial industrial area that had not been fully developed. And it seemed like the economic data was kind of making it seem like it was never going to be finished. And so there were existing members of the HOA who did not know that this project was being proposed, even though it had already been applied for and the relationships were already there. And so it was this constant tug of war between the HOA and the applicant, and we were kind of in between that. And it got pretty nasty. I mean, I heard some pretty awful things said about what kinds of people this project was going to bring in, pretty direct, that it kind of shocked me. But, at the end of the day, we just kind of got them as far as we could, and the HOA sued them before they even got to hearing, and they just tanked the whole project. But the applicant at the end of the day said, Colton, thank you for you and your team for working with us and getting us this far. And we're going to go look somewhere else to do this. So not a happy ending, like I said, but ultimately this is the way things work in the real world. And, when I'm hearing all these kind of awful things, I don't react to it. I'm not going to like chastise, the applicant or the members of the public who are saying these things. And I'm just trying to stick to the standards. So bring them to the standards, and let's try to actually be adults in the room and talk about this project.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Okay, so with the master's in planning and the work you've done at Eagle, you're obviously well versed in planning. And you've probably done some research on Paonia before you came to this conversation. Through the lens of a planner, what do you think Paonia needs?
What do you need?
Yeah, what do you think Paonia needs?
I try not to I try not to be the person that comes in and says, here's this and this and this that needs to be done. I did see you guys are embarking on some long range planning, which is always great. I don't know how old your existing like comprehensive plan is, but that's always a good thing to refresh sort of what's the vision of this community. Something I'm always a champion for is more systems of community engagement. Something I just felt when I was there was that there is kind of this community fabric that's there, and I think kind of tapping into that and channeling it back into the decision-making process would be a great thing, because that's kind of an infrastructure that can serve a lot of different things that are going on, and can kind of adapt and react to things as they're happening. I know it's a bit ethereal to think about, but I do view community engagement as kind of infrastructure, building in different channels and places for people to go, and going to them rather than asking them to come to you, and trying to figure out like what are ways we can actually reach our community. I think is essential, because like I said, it can apply to a lot of different things. I mean, obviously there's infrastructure stuff that, y'all are very well aware of, that is important to figure out. And I can't say that there's any unique issues that I haven't seen in other communities in rural Colorado. It's just kind of, how do we all deal with these? I mean, housing is obviously one of the biggest things to address, and there's no simple solution for that, but it definitely requires partnership.
So, we're under a water tap moratorium, and this has
Yes.
created a pent-up demand for development, which we're gonna probably lift the moratorium 2-3 years out. And so what do you see are the pros and cons of the oncoming development? What way do you think development would fit best with Paonia?
Yeah. So, obviously this is a great opportunity to do long range planning, to kind of figure out what you want to do in terms of, zone districts and density, and, all the kinds of things that go along with that process. It's a great time to build community engagement infrastructure, so that, once development is starting to come back, that the community can be actively involved in that discussion. Because, I've just noticed a lot of times in this long range planning stuff, things are so sort of ethereal, like, yeah, we want this, we want housing, we want all this, and that is great, and it's awesome to have like great policies and actions sort of planned out in that. But once it actually hits the the dais, people's feeling kind of changes, because it's a material, it's right there. And so I think having that system so people can know what's happening and be enabled to, come and speak their piece about it, I think is really important. Because if there's a lot of development at once, the thing that, Eagle has experienced insane development from like 1990 to 2000, it like doubled in population. And so, I've seen that still kind of impact the identity of this place. Like, there's kind of these 2 areas, now there's going to be 3, and they're kind of it wasn't a natural growth. So I think it's important to think about the identity of your community, the infrastructure, where do you need to plan for that? You can still have conversations about development and things like that, and kind of figure out, anticipate where that's going to happen. In terms of what needs to happen, I mean, obviously housing is critical. You know, I don't know exactly, you know, I just can't say I'm familiar enough with the community to know what the community wants to be. And that would be one of my priorities in coming onto this role. But you know, like I said, I'm not someone who wants to just say what it should be without really being that familiar with what people want.
Okay. Questions for us?
I am interested in the kind of the strife thing. It sounds like you guys have a positive mindset about, you know, the direction you're taking, and maybe I'm just kind of curious about that, I guess.
Go ahead.
I can probably add to that. I was a very involved citizen, came to every meeting for about 2 years, and then now as a trustee. And I have to say that a lot of the strife had to do with some of our higher leadership was not interpreting code properly
Oh, okay.
and making decisions that then put the trustees in a bad spot with the citizens, to be quite honest. And we now have separated that position. That person was serving as administrator and clerk, which is much for a single person to do, which I think had a lot to do with the decisions that were made. And so we have since separated that position. We now have a town clerk, and we are now hiring a town administrator, and Leslie has come in as our interim, and her experience has been invaluable for us understanding our code better and making it clear what kind of decision we make as trustees.
I'd like to speak to that also. Actually, two aspects. The first aspect, as far as the community, we have a number of people that are watchdogs, what I'd call community watchdogs, that really keep a microscope to the town. They're, in my experience, now there's just my experience, their microscope is colored by a lack of trust and past experience that they've had with the town, where they just assume bad intent. And so we typically get that from a group of community members that basically have that assumption about what we're trying to do in the town. There are also a number of people in the community that really are rallying behind what we're trying to do, and they're positive forces. So we have a mixed bag as far as the community goes that way. I want to talk a little bit about the board too, because I've been on the board. Mary and I are the longest serving members of the board. And there was a lot of strife within the board. What I've seen is this process of hiring Leslie as an interim administrator, in our process of trying to hire an administrator now. We really came together as a board, and I felt like we've made some really good decisions. We did a final round of interviews, and we unanimously decided that neither one of our finalists were suitable for us. And there wasn't a lot of strife about that. I'm feeling real good about this process. I feel good about the communication in the board, and I don't dread going to board meetings anymore.
Like, gut feeling's important, I'm telling you. Yeah, that's great. You know, maybe broad. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in a little bit on one thing, aspect that I didn't hear anybody mention, and that's the meeting process itself. Basically, the responsibility of the chair to maintain equitable set of rules for everybody as they speak, make sure that rules are followed, that the public is informed about them. And Mayor Backren has made a great and actually productive effort in the past, I'd say year and a couple months at least, in being less reactive and more supportive of process in our meetings, I think, which has helped a lot.
Yeah, things can devolve quickly. I've seen that happen a lot. But it's hard to manage that when people are heated up and fired up about stuff and trying to be equitable. I mean, we tried to implement a process where people could give their time to someone else, and people were banking up time, and you know, it can work, but it's just, the more things you add, the more rules you have to put in, and then it gets really hard. But yeah, I can relate to that.
And I have actually a little input on that. This is Leslie. The town has an unusually interactive meeting style. So instead of just, and I'm explaining this from, because the board's used to it, but there's a lot of discussion back and forth between the public and the board throughout the entire meeting. The other issue was that the town attorney and I have been working on is the chain of command was unclear. There were citizen groups as well as committees involved in direct supervision of staff people that were not the town administrator. And we've been cleaning that up so that when the new administrator comes in, there'll be a clear chain of command and the administration of the town will be left to staff and committees and the board won't be as directly involved. I also want to mention what I think is that I know Paonia has always had some strife, but I think the embezzlement that occurred a little over 10 years ago really colored people's ability to trust the town. And it will just take time. I think we're not able to do financial reports right now, which is something that I'm working on because it's unacceptable for the board not to have clear financial reports every month. It's going to take some money to do that because there's a number of issues that have caused that. But I think as these things, what my goal has been is to straighten things out. So when a new administrator comes in, you'll have kind of a clear path and just be able to be an administrator and not have to clean up these issues. But so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I'm kind of curious too, maybe just broadening out a bit. What are some of the challenges you see for Paonia in the next 5 to 10 years? Or what are the things you're anticipating? Obviously the development stuff was mentioned, but I'm kind of curious what other things?
Definitely, once the water moratorium is lifted, we are going to have development issues. So I'm really glad that we're doing our master planning efforts right now, and then doing the housing needs assessment right now. So that we can, as you say, chart out a course for the future now, so that when we do have moratorium, that we have a plan in place to deal with those things. We do have, Paonia has become, like many other small communities in Western Colorado, experiencing a destination place. And because we have high-speed internet, we have a lot of younger families and people who can work remotely who are moving into this place to raise their kids in a safe environment and are able to work remotely. So we have a different kind of population that's coming to this town. I mean, we're an old coal mining town. I don't really know the history of Eagle enough to speak to that.
Agricultural more so.
Okay, so we're agricultural and coal mining. Those were our 2 bases of operation. As of now, it's agricultural and primarily agricultural ranching, organic farming, wineries, and tourism. The coal mines still provide some income, but not the way it used to be. Not nearly the way it used to be. And the families that used to provide and used to live on that stuff, the older families that have not moved away without new work and like solar energy and whatever, are still here and they're dying now, frankly. And there's some of the old, we don't want anything to change ever. So it's still a mix of the conservative and the liberal, and you know, since Paonia Purple and in the 60s and the crazy hippie population that used to be in Paonia. I mean, there's still that faction where far right liberal and you know the rainbow people sometimes come through, and there's we walk down to Delta and we talk to people in Delta, and yeah, you think the streets were crammed with dreadlocked people smoking pot down the streets of Paonia. It's the perception we have in the county. And while we are the liberal bastion of Delta County, that's not really the way things are. We are a very artistic community, and I think that a lot of ways, the more and more it's going to be average person that is, you know, a lot of us support these.
According to Vision 10, the number one source of money for this area is retirement and assets with seniors. And we do have a steady flow of children, which I really like, it keeps the community viable. But we are an agricultural community, and I always say our number one crop is kids.
And we've had more kids come into this community than I've seen here since
Wow.
closing of the coal mines, and kids left with the miners who took them away. So it's lovely to have a grade school allowing.
But something that always blows my mind here in Eagle is I don't realize how many kids are in this town until there's like a big parade for Christmas or the Flight Days parade we do, and they just like line the streets, and it's like, I don't know. It obviously is so important to the community, but you just don't always see it. So yeah, that's great.
I would just like to add that, let's see, the grant amount that Leslie and Mary just put in was what, 23 million?
Yeah, well, 23 million for water and then.
Wow.
And then 8 million for sewer.
Right, and that's a lot of our sewer in the alleys here in town is 50-plus-year-old clay, all needs to be replaced. And we have 2 different water treatment plants, one of which is not running, and we want to get it up and running. And we have a tank that needs to be relined. We'd like to get a new tank. We need to fix other tank. We have a lot going on in terms of our infrastructure, which is going to dominate staff time and decision-making for the next, I'd say, at least 5 years.
How is the public viewing that? Is it kind of like, this is necessary, we understand, or is there contention?
Well, right now it's very positive. As our SRF loan goes through and they look at our rate structure, that may change when we have water rates. But right now it's very positive, even though we have had to we did raise water rates at the beginning of the year, water, sewer, and trash rates at the beginning of the year. But yeah, everybody knows we had a significant water problem in 2019 where the town was out of water for about 5 days, but the surrounding areas, some of those of our out of town water users were out of water for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So the fact that we are repairing things, people are very happy about it. But at the same time, the cost will come home.
Yeah, it's just reminiscent of what I witnessed at the town. Just
Yeah.
a lot of conversation about the rates. Like you said, like it felt like this was necessary until they saw the price tag, and then it was, wow, we need to have a lot more conversation about this, which we did. And we did a lot around that, but it was more than we initially expected.
Oh, David, you're muted, Dave. You said that way, nobody could hear you.
No, I was just wrapping up. Thanks so much, Colton. I really appreciate your answers and your time with us, and just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, Dave has to leave early, and we have a couple of other absent board members. We have one board member in the hospital and another board member he's involved in something else, and he will be on later in the afternoon, but yeah.
Drop in, drop out. It's fine. Nice to meet you, Dave.
Okay.
Colton, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
Did you work under Brandy Ryder at the town?
I
of Eagle?
did.
Okay.
Yes. I
Thank
was
you.
there before she started, and then she
Uh-huh.
joined, and then I was under her. My main person I was under was Morgan Landers. She was the ComDev director.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for us?
I think I'm good on my questions.
Well, let me just kind of explain where we're at. We've already interviewed 4 other candidates. We will be interviewing another couple this afternoon. And so we'll be done with our preliminary interviews today. We're going to try and make a decision on finalists tomorrow morning. So you should know relatively quickly as to whether you'll be a finalist or not. So of course, if you are chosen as a finalist, your name, cover letter, and resume will become public information. And I'm assuming you will agree to that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. The letters of reference, medical, psychological, and sociological data concerning the finalists, of course, are not open to public review according to Colorado law. In addition, the finalists will be asked to consent to a background check, and that will include a credit history. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So like I say, you should know within a couple days whether you are a finalist or not, and thank you very much for taking time to interview with us, and we will be in touch.
That sounds good. No matter what happens, we will visit Pania again. We loved it, so we'll be there again.
One more.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Did you all get the email that
Oh, yeah.
our next
Yeah.
guy withdrew, Quinn withdrew?
It's fine. It's fine. All right.
So he's good planning experience and good knowledge of administrative, which he acknowledged.
Yep.
He kind of recomes to really does.
Yeah.
The question on planning is a bit of a trick question, but it said all the way, maintaining community identity on there. That he needed to actually understand more of the town more, know the community more before actually making suggestions. Always collect data first. That's exactly the right answer. And the fact that he recognized the moratorium is actually open to do some serious.
Yeah, I was really impressed. I was more impressed than I thought I was, actually. And, really very helpful as we move forward. I know the only thing I see is, yeah, I don't like that. Vanish. That's a flag for me, but. I mean, it could be a possibility.
I didn't see any, management experience, like all those samples were. Yeah.
Right.
Is, you know, infrastructure, will speak, Mr. Answer real light, basically, like, if we were hiring a community planner, then that, I'm with this guy, but if he's gonna, you know, he can't do it less than this.
Well, no.
Well, that's what we're hiring. You know,
I was curious, do you know Brandy that he worked with, the woman you checked on? Leslie, you
Yes.
asked about Brandy?
Yes. Yeah. She's an excellent city manager. I think with him, your land use issues are solved. I think you're going to have to bring in someone to project manage water and sewer, as well as if you have federal grants you want to write. His grant writing experience is probably, he can do all the state grants, but direct federal grants like for the generators and stuff, you may have to bring somebody in. But, I think that he's definitely capable of moving into the next level of position. Although I have to say that I looked up Eric, and I think there may be a good chance that he is interested in Paonia. So we'll see.
You
Yeah,
looked up who? Say it again.
Eric Osterberg
Right.
before.
Right.
Yeah, I was a little concerned that he was so good that you wouldn't have a chance, but my guess is, having read about his experience and what his interests are, that he needs a rest from such a stressful job, and he loves his partner and he loves hunting and fishing. So you've got that in the bag.
Yeah, that's actually.
Yep.
Eric, my concern with him was that he's really way overqualified too much. So if you need, I thought also he might want to relax for a while.
Mhm.
I don't think he's a relaxing type.
We'll see.
I just wanted to add in with Colton. I have to say, I liked his demeanor. He comes across as very humble and thoughtful. And I think he's somebody that could certainly work into a position. I just don't know if we have that luxury.
Yeah.
Being a manager, of course, he hasn't done that, doesn't have administrative experience, but this is a chicken and egg. You have to start somewhere. So if the person has to drive, has some of the latent talents, and they, as Leslie said, could step up to the next level.
Mhm. And generally speaking, a town the size of the Paonia is a first manager job. You're rarely going to get somebody experienced unless they're a retiree like you're already seeing.
Exactly, beginning of career, end of career.
Yeah.
And we're not a mid-career town. Okay, well, we could recess for about an hour and then come back.
No, we have another one.
No.
No,
He got noticed.
no, he withdrew. He called me this morning, called me.
Yeah,
today.
and he should have withdrawn.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So that I'll let him send an email to let everybody know he withdrew.
That's good, I got downtown to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking let's
Yeah, we
do
can
whatever Sam can do for us and we'll come back.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and somebody like to make a motion to recess for an hour.
I move we recess for now.
Second,
A second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, so we're in recess for an hour. We'll be back for about. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe 2:15 or so, yeah, 2:20, stuff like that.
We make sure everything's rolling right.
Yep. Okay, all right.
That's for 2:20.
Leslie, how many cats do you have?
I have 3, and the one that you saw especially likes to stand between me and the computer and take up the screen. So I was pushing her down the whole time.
Just see the tips of her ears.
And
Which I
and
love.
I don't, how do they know that you have Zoom on? I mean, they know. It's like they love Zoom. It's weird.
You have a cat. I wish I could have more. I love cats. That made me smile. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Leslie, when your cat needs attention, does it crawl across your keyboard and
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. I have one that doesn't love Zoom meetings, but the other 2, it's like Zoom's on. Let's go stand in front of the computer.
That's because they have you. They have you. You can't leave. I know, you can't leave.
You know, there was a cat on PBS News Hour that actually people were more interested in the cat than the news.
Yeah. The NPR reporter that has her cat on all the time. I read about that.
Right. See everybody soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
2:20 it is. All right, what am I signing?
Yes.
Sign it. As we put together the personnel. Let's see. So this is just to add Ruben as a signator.
Yeah.
And we have Amanda and right, do I need to sign here too? Yes, I do. Okay, and we do think Rick will be here for 2:30?
I think so. I called him up because he said he was gonna probably be done by noon. Figured, okay, could possibly have been here by 12:30, wasn't sure.
Okay.
Yeah, his son's having a manager issue.
Does he know that 1:30 got canceled?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect, thank you.
I was on a call. I
Oh,
was on
just,
the phone. John, Dave.
oh my God, getting all the logistics and who's, what's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll go give this to Cindy.
Stuart Mesa, president, and one other board member were at the last Citizens United Water meeting. You were there, Chief.
Dave Hers.
So they're just concerned that we're gonna, historically trash this.
I know that.
Okay, well, we're happy, let's say, the day, side slid down into the Stewart ditch.
Oh.
Fortunately, the ditch wasn't running at the time, and the entire downtown area would have been under about 3 or 4 feet of water.
Which, the $500,000 gallon?
This happened back in the early,
It's not the water. That's 2 different things.
oh, you're talking about the water, oh, that's right, what's the ditch, is the water, sorry.
Yeah,
And this is the ditch,
no, it's the water.
Yeah.
Dave Hers, was it Dave that was here at the last
It's
meeting?
a water company.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
not a
water.
ditch.
I just figured it last. Okay.
So I'm gonna get this faxed off to Leslie. And then, probably set the meeting with him.
Yeah, what, you're the mayor, why don't you go ahead and set it up?
Well, get Leslie, and then we'll get it set and resolved. Yeah, that's, we'll pull in the roll and then
Want to do it in a regular meeting, you want to do it in a special?
No,
I thought a special would be better.
if we did it with you, me, Leslie, and Jeremiah or whoever. Yeah,
Just so we stay within the two-person limit.
right.
Yeah, I think it's better way, because then we won't have a lot of things through interference from the community, we just see people straight line on the issue. Because it's really an issue thing, it's not.
Answer their questions, and if we have bigger concerns, about pulling other water companies or whatever, then we can do that, but let's answer their questions
Yeah,
before we
makes-
just go in. All right, never mind.
I didn't see you at the annual meeting for the Friends of the Library. Have you ever come to those?
Oh, it was outstanding, I certainly have some.
I know.
All things.
Being on more than one board was probably not the wisest decision I ever made,
And
but
now, that's what, when I.
other stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it just, it was too much.
Weren't you police agent?
I was, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they finally got all the reports. Got her, I'm gonna take 2 months off after I put me here.
We have good food.
We move that gas. So we move this gas. That's in there. That's going there. And that's going there. I just, so
Because she wanted something like mine.
So.
That's never allowed. It just feels hard. Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna just see this.
Yes, I'm here.
Well, we're in an adjournment until 2:20.
Okay.
How'd your court case go?
He extended. Yeah. He didn't have his ducks.
Well, I think it was the third slot. Sorry. Yeah. But while you're doing that, let me check this. And I have an extension for it. But maybe if you.
What's in there, but it's.
Yeah. I was thinking.
Oh, yeah, only the. Yeah, the bottom ones are hot. Yeah.
Yeah, like that just. Okay, so you should be live. Yeah, juice.
Here.
Today's 20th. It's wondering, I have to think about.
All I have is the agenda.
Yeah, it should be okay.
When it says join the computer audio, you just close that window. You don't have to worry about leaving your microphone or your speakers to a different one. Well, then it says, are you sure you don't want?
Yeah, I'm not sure it gave me that choice when I logged on this just now, earlier. Of course, I was frantically just trying to shut down my audio.
Questions?
We can share if you don't. Sure, that's.
They're calling Dave.
We can see you.
Maybe it's obscure and meaningless. That when we're in executive session, we can't even vote to adjourn. Technically.
Oh.
But it really doesn't matter, you just let it run, like the executive session run, but it doesn't make any difference, but not making a difference is one of my things.
No. Didn't make a difference.
There we go.
Not down there, let's see.
Well, we can come off, I can, well, you can't be seen anyway, so I'll just send you. Let our new guy in.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam, we're ready.
David.
You are.
I have no idea.
It seems like it's, right. Yeah.
We can see you in that.
So, can you hear us?
No.
Okay, I think you're muted.
David, if you can hear us, you're muted.
Okay, you're talking, we can't hear you. I'm gonna see about Sam. Sam, you probably can't hear you.
You can't hear us, David?
He's talking.
All right, so I'll do like I did with the other guy the other day, and I'll be sure.
Sure.
Can you hear us, David? Nod your head, please. Watch both ways.
So please, Sam.
What's it look like over there?
Here. I mean, there's way of me.
I think.
Sam.
I don't know, I guess.
I wonder,
I could call him.
That's a really good look, asking that, say like, hey.
Zoom in, that
You or you ever know minutes. Can you speak to the board?
Yeah.
It's a better.
Leslie, we're having some technical difficulties getting David in.
Yeah, I just want to mention that Thomas and Dave Weber were really hard to hear. I don't know why just those two, because I heard Paige and Mary fine.
Is it where the,
Can you hear me now, Leslie?
Yeah.
So it's coming in through you guys, but.
No. It should be
Messed up.
coming in through the speakers here.
Yeah, it's coming out of the mic's not on. Our mic needs to be turned on over there, Tom.
It is. It is. You can see it on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yes, and here, if I talk, it does, yeah, it's showing up,
Yeah.
it's picking up. Jesse, can you hear me okay?
No, you sound very like you're talking at the bottom of a barrel. And I
Oh,
don't know,
that's-
because nobody else sounds like that, so I'm not sure why that's happening.
Dave,
Can you hear us over there? Can you hear me when I'm here?
Yes,
Okay, that's cool.
way better.
yeah, can't see him anyway.
Well, I can be down here and you can move the mic. Okay. All right.
Thanks for the heads up, Leslie.
Hmm.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's an outcast. Board doesn't love me.
You want to take the first one and we'll go that way? Or do you want to start? Let's do that. That might be easier to remember. Kind of, we did, I guess we started with Thomas.
Yeah.
And then we had Dave though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Brown, not right on.
Do you want to start with the questions, Thomas? Do you want to be number one? Okay. Number one.
Do it the same way.
Yeah, you'll be.
You'll just like.
And it's just the four of us asking questions. Some modifications. It's just a little change. Yeah, we're still like. Again, for them out. Okay.
Okay,
Yay! Welcome to Peonia. I am Mayor Backman, and we have it's most of the board here. We've had a couple of people. We have one person in the hospital, unfortunately, and another one who couldn't be here today. But we're going to have, I'm going to let the rest of the board go around and introduce themselves.
I'm Paige Smith, trustee.
Rick Stelter, trustee.
Dave Weber, trustee.
Dave is off screen. I'm Thomas Markle, also a trustee.
Hi, and I'm Leslie Klusmeyer. I'm the interim town administrator. I'm just listening.
Okay, nice to see you, Leslie.
Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to ask you a bunch of questions, and then we will let you have time at the end of our questions to ask us some questions.
Sure.
Okay,
So to start with, David, what attracted you to this position in the first place?
Well, perhaps what attracted me the most was my wife and I, we've been living in the Cleveland area, Cleveland-Akron area, and this is the heart of the industrial Rust Belt. And we have both decided that we were going to be moving west or moving south. And then when I saw the information about Peonia, it struck me as this little carved out place of heaven. And especially with all the things that are going on in there, the festivals, the natural beauty, it really struck a chord in terms of attracting us.
Thank you. So please describe your supervisory experience and style.
My supervisor experience in the biggest role I had was several years ago when I was mayor of the city of Euclid. At that time, it was a town of about 70,000. Most recently, I was the city manager in a small town of about 5,000 called Newton Falls. But their service profiles were very similar to most municipalities. The service profile very similar to your service profile there in Peonia. And I'd have to say that my style is more than anything else collaborative. And I really believe that in order to move forward with something, sort of an authoritarian top-down style is counterproductive for a number of reasons. Even if you have a great idea, an authoritarian style is difficult in terms of getting people to buy in for whatever that idea is. The other thing is, in a city administrator, it better be collaborative, because you folks I'm looking at on the screen, you're the elected officials, and you're answerable directly to people that put you in office. And a city administrator that doesn't have a collaborative style is in for a series of fights and heartaches. So definitely a collaborative style.
Thank you. What can you bring to the role of managing a small town municipal government?
Well, I probably can bring some things to a small town management that you don't necessarily get in a small town manager. And by that, I mean someone who's got experience in the big areas, in larger communities, and has the experience of doing things that a small town doesn't necessarily have access to. For example, in your community, in looking at some of the candidate surveys I saw online and some of the way questions were answered by those of you that were elected, infrastructure is a common theme that you have to be addressing there, especially in your water plant and in your roads. My experience is one of having unbelievable success in the area of getting grants. Now, the recently passed legislation signed by the president is called the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's a little bit misleading term because it contains more access to municipal dollars for infrastructure than any piece of legislation in the history of the universe. And if you got somebody who's got a very positive track record, and my track record is in Ohio, being the #1 community administrator in terms of a per capita acquisition of capital dollars for infrastructure. And I'm talking about grants. I'm not talking about loans, although some of those are available. But the point is that I think I can bring to the table something that you don't necessarily get in a small town administrator. And the dollars mean even more. And the number of dollars that are available are in the billions of dollars under this new legislation. That doesn't mean you're going to get $1 billion, but I'm confident you can get millions of dollars, even for a small community like yours, because you have great needs. And secondly, you've got something that a lot of people don't realize is important getting these federal grants. That is, you've got good, sound financial management. What does that mean? That means you can get the project done responsibly, and get it done in time. Every project where I have been the city administrator that got the grant, we've come in under budget and within the calendar. So it's just a rare opportunity with what's going on at the federal level right now.
Thank you.
Give us an example of a time when you did not agree with the board or your direct managers. How did you use your position to help find a solution?
Well, probably the most dramatic situation like that occurred a few years ago when I was mayor in Euclid, Ohio, and we were hiring police officers and we're using the civil service test. But it was a community where we did not have one single African-American or minority on the entire police department and had never hired anyone in the police department. So I initiated a program in which we could do an analysis of candidates that had them meeting the quality, intelligence, and capability levels that we wanted, but also reached out to try to go into some other communities to find a candidate. And we succeeded in that regard, and they were quite surprised. In any case, we were able to hire the very first minority in that police department. And, you know, sometimes symbolism is important in the area of diversity and community involvement. Symbolism can mean something.
Thank you.
Can you give us an example of a time when you made an error which had a large impact? And what did you do to minimize that impact?
I'm sorry, an error that had what impact? A negative impact?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I want to repeat myself. Can you give us an example of a time when you made an error which had a large impact? And what did you do to minimize that impact?
Well, first of all, if anybody tells you that they've never made a mistake or an error, run the other way. because they're lying about that. The other thing is that when it comes to decision making, sometimes there's so many unknowns that you don't know exactly what direction to go in. So you have to have some faith in your advisors, the elected officials, and then make a decision and then try to make that decision work. One of the areas in which I think that I've made a mistake in the past is in communicating with legislators on the council floor. I have sometimes provided information in a way that was a little, probably a bit, providing them with information in a way that included information that they didn't want to hear at that time, that maybe should have been done in executive session. And the way I cleared that up was trying to make sure I built a relationship with the legislators, that is the members of the council, such that we could communicate on a regular basis. I believe in burning up the phone lines, using the emails, but there are times when you need to exercise better judgment in terms of what's being done in executive session. And I remember crossing the line in that regard and making sure that that never happened again.
Thank you. Describe your experience managing municipal water and sewer systems.
Sure. Both of my management experiences involved systems such as that. In Euclid, our sewer system was a regional sewer system. So we ended up probably servicing municipal sewer service to communities to the tune of around $200 million. And we also did quite a bit of grappling with the Environmental Protection Agency in that regard. In Newton Falls, we not only managed the sewer system, but also operated a water system on a regional basis. And I really believe that the city manager, city administrator, has to be hands-on. We had some instances where our water tower was malfunctioning and it was causing some difficulty in terms of mixing our form of water with forms of water that were not consistent with the processes that we had. And the EPA didn't like that at all. So I made sure that when the EPA came to town, I met with them personally, that I wasn't just taking our water administrator and saying, hey, you go talk to those people. Especially in a smaller community, the city administrator can act on a hands-on basis as a helpmate to all the people that operate these various systems. And we settled our issues with the EPA over in Euclid. We resolved our issues with the EPA over in Newton Falls. The other problem with sewer and water systems, though, is keeping up with the infrastructure needs and keeping up with the EPA requirements, because they're changing on a regular basis. So that's another reason why my experience has been stay close to the regulators, stay close to them, be on a first name basis, get their cell phones, phone numbers, so you can pick up the phone and resolve issues. That'll save the city a lot of money in the long run and save a lot of heartache. And it allows you to be informed and educated in a way that you as the legislators can hear from me about how we're protecting the consumer's interest. You know, when it comes to water, after what happened in Flint, Michigan, people are very, very concerned about these things. Only a few minutes drive from where I'm sitting right now is East Palestine, Ohio. And people all throughout the country are on a hair trigger of concern about water quality. And I know the levels, the fecal levels, the lead levels, the chemical levels, and you better have administrators, a city administrator that has a handle on these things specifically, so they can speak with these regulators in a way that protects your community and protects the pocketbook of your consumers.
Thank you. Please describe your professional work experience related to project analysis and how you explain your analysis and recommendation to lay people.
Well, you know, that's always a tough challenge, especially if you've been in government for a while. I've seen people in government explaining things, referring to these alphabet soup of government agencies or using letters to describe particular programs from the government. You have to be able to communicate with people in a way that they can relate to, but is also professional in the communications with the legislators that have to evaluate these things. A recent experience we had here in Newton Falls is where we had fecal matter going from certain neighborhoods directly into the river, the Mahoning River, where we draw our water in order to process water for the consumers, for our citizens. But it didn't make sense to get bogged down in a bunch of charts from the EPA. I had to look people in the eye and explain to them that we needed to find the money and the funding to decrease the amount of fecal matter so that our plant could have an easier time of processing the water. And most people understand, as long as you're not trying to speak above their heads, and also, probably the most important part, tell them the truth. Sometimes it's a bitter pill, but tell people the truth. Maybe most importantly, tell you folks that are serving as trustees, let them know the harshest of the truth, the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and then you can make some educated decisions. That's my philosophy in those areas.
Please describe your professional work experience with grant writing, grant contract management, and reporting. Specifically explain which elements you were directly responsible for.
Well, that last question is probably the easiest one, because especially in a community of this size, grant writing, grant management, grant response, grant reporting should be done directly out of the city administrator's office. And that's how I did it in Newton Falls. And we had the highest per capita rate of grants of any community in the state of Ohio. And by the way, these grant forms, they aren't as intimidating as you might think. They're merely asking for information. And one of the crimes that I've seen throughout my career is communities that should be getting and would be getting grants or were eligible for grants just weren't getting the grants because they weren't following through on the process. Now, there's one other element to that that's very, very important. You have to have good engineers. Grant writing is often driven on a project basis. And so we better have reliable engineers that can come up with project estimates that are reliable and that are specific enough. And again, there's a community on the east side of Cleveland that is in desperate need of grants, but they never hire an appropriate engineering firm, and then they don't get anything. That's a crime. So relying on the experts from an engineering standpoint, but doing the paperwork in the office of the city manager, doing it myself is an important factor, especially when questions come down the pike, as they inevitably will.
Thank you.
Can you describe your experience with developing a budget and monitoring that budget throughout the fiscal year?
Sure. The city administrator has got to have his finger on how revenues are doing almost on a daily basis, and expenses almost on a daily basis. In a smaller community, it's actually not that hard to do. But your predominant amount of your money comes from sales taxes, and there are reporting agencies where you can get that information. Developing a budget, it's got to be conservative so that you don't go over budget. And by the way, your community continues to funnel money back into your general fund because you don't go over budget. Now, in every community in which I have been a city administrator, we have received citation-free audits, and we have won the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association Award, every single year, which gives tremendous credibility for your community when you're going out to get grants, or you're applying for something else, or if you're trying to get some bonds approved, something of that nature. That GFOA certificate of achievement is important. By the way, your community, based on what I see about your budgets and the way your money's been managed, you're eligible to get that award, but it doesn't look like you've applied in the last few years. But you're eligible for that award. And again, it lends great credibility and it gives confidence to your citizens. So keep an eye on the budget on a daily basis. Make sure the budget hearings are very, very transparent. I know that you've got your budget hearings. You don't have your audit back for 2022 yet, But in looking at your 2023 budget, you guys are well managed and thinking towards the future, and even setting aside that 1% income tax that goes to a capital budget. What a smart thing to do. You'd be shocked at how many communities don't really have a capital improvement plan. So you're ahead of the game in that regard, and just being on top of things. How many times or how successful would your own family be if you didn't keep an eye on the checkbook on a daily basis? It's important, and it's manageable in a community of this size.
Thank you. How have you handled the situation when a person you directly supervise has made a serious mistake?
Yeah, it's a difficult issue, but it's really a process of managing people, sort of following the golden rule, treat others as I would want to be treated. Now, there are occasions when there are people that screw up to the point where you're getting into either quasi-criminal or massive negligence territory. But generally speaking, absent that, my theory is give people the opportunity to improve, to deal with the mistakes they've made. I'll give you an example if I have just a moment. We had a young lady in our finance department where during the COVID, the city council passed a measure to give our citizens a discount on all their utility bills, because we also supply electric in Newton Falls, water and sewer. Give them a discount, and city council decided to do that for a 30-day period. Well, the young lady in finance who was in charge of this activity inadvertently mailed out a notice giving them a discount for a 60-day period. Now, that was a pretty big financial difference to the management of our utilities. And I sat down with this young lady, sent her to an organization that helps people improve their own self-management skills. She came out of that with a certificate. I suspended her for 10 days without pay, and she turned out to be a better employee after all of that. And of course, we had to sit down with the city council to explain what happened and communicate with the community. In the final analysis, what the council decided to do is let them have the extra 30 days. Actually, it was a pretty smart way to handle it politically. And that young lady is still with that municipal utility department. She's doing a great job today. But it was a serious problem. But again, as I said earlier, there is no one that is absolutely perfect. You know, Ted Williams was the best hitter in the history of baseball, but 6 out of 10 times he made it out.
Thank you. Describe a difficult work situation or project and how you were able to overcome it.
Probably one of the most difficult situations I had to deal with was one that we had in Newton Falls just a couple of years ago. And that was a project in which commercial development was looking at moving into Newton Falls, but they could not find the proper real estate in which to do it. And the city identified a piece of real estate that would be perfect for the project, but it had some serious environmental problems. So we purchased that real estate and went to the state of Ohio because they had a program to ameliorate the environmental problems. It was a underground petroleum tank problem. And the state had this beautiful program to have the state pay for it completely. Well, shortly after we purchased the property, the state legislature had passed some guidelines and directed the development agencies of the state not to fund this type of program anymore. And we had just purchased the real estate. So I spent some time working with the governor's staff, working with the state legislators, and got them to provide a legislative carve-out because the fact that we had purchased this property. After we purchased the property, the state funded the thing fantastically. We then took that piece of real estate, gave it to the developer as the incentive, and it turned out to be a win-win for everybody. But that caused a few sleepless nights after the state made those changes.
Dave?
Mr. Lynch, I noticed that you have 37 years in law. Why did you quit law for other ventures?
Well, there's a couple of things in that regard. And this goes a little bit to what Trustee Smith said to me. She said, whatever you do, be very honest about everything that occurred. I practiced law in and around my involvement in municipal government. And sometime in 2018, I had a former client who filed a complaint against me with the Bar Association saying that I had missed some kind of a deadline. I filed a response, indicated I did not miss the deadline. But at that very moment in time, I was offered the opportunity to be the city manager in Newton Falls. And to be honest with you, I love municipal government management. So I resigned my license in Ohio. I was not disbarred. I resigned my license in Ohio. I took the job as city manager, and there was no follow-up ramifications from that. But it was a good time to get back into municipal government.
The July 20th, 2021 Tribune Chronicle said that you were fired from Newton Falls in a heated meeting. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I do. And again, this goes to a little bit about what Trustee Page had talked about, making sure I'm very straightforward about things. I don't know that it was a heated meeting. What occurred in Newton Falls was I was appointed on a 3-2 vote. So my appointment was opposed by one group of the community on the city council. In fact, our city council can be described as the Hatfields have some votes and the McCoys have some other votes. And so the McCoys prevailed and I was appointed the city manager. The mayor, who was part of the Hatfield group, came across a situation where one of the McCoy groups on city council resigned. So he appointed a Hatfield. Now the 3-2 vote was in the other direction. But I don't know if the Tribune Chronicle said it was a heated meeting. I didn't think that it was. I knew where the votes had changed. And in addition to that, the city council's vote at that particular time was ruled by our law director as not being within the bounds of their ability to do so. And so what happened was the members of council and myself all got together and they said, well, maybe we're not in a position where we can do something about this now that we have 3-2 vote against you. But wouldn't you like to be in a situation where it's a positive environment to begin with? And so we worked out a separation agreement, and it was voluntary on my part and approved by the city council in writing. And I don't know if there was a follow-up article like that, trustee, but being a city manager is not for the faint of heart. I was telling Trustee Smith when she initially called me that being a city manager is very much like being a manager in the major leagues. Billy Martin said that managers are hired to be fired. George Steinbrenner fired Billy Martin 3 times and hired him 4 times. So it's not for the faint of heart, especially in Newton Falls. Newton Falls has a history of having the politics swing one way or another, and then whichever group is in charge firing the city manager. In fact, they had a city manager that lasted 1 day. 1 day, and then they fired him after 1 day. If you contact the International City Managers Association, you can ask the staff people there, what community in America is the most inflammatory in terms of thin ice that every city manager is on? And they'll actually say Newton Falls, Ohio. Go figure.
So my last question is, Paonia is an agricultural community. We produce a significant amount of the fruit and organic produce for the state of Colorado. As a consequence of that, we have a large number of Hispanics in our community because they're the working force, most of them legal, but an occasional illegal. They're more than tolerated because they're absolutely essential for our economic base.
Sure.
And I want to
give you a quote from WKBN News. At a Newton Falls City Council meeting on August 17, 2020, Lynch is accused of making a similar statement referring to Morales as a tunnel guy and stated, quote, "He's working on his green card, we think, folks," end quote. Comment is heard about 18 minutes and 50 seconds into the recording. The statement was made as Lynch was recognizing those that help clean up tunnels. Morales maintains that he's a U.S. citizen. He was born in Florida and graduated from Newton Falls, according to the complaint. Morales contends that the comments were derogatory, false, defamatory, and that he's been subjected to scorn and ridicule in the community and forced to change his residence, according to the complaint. Morales is seeking at least $25,000 in damages, along with court costs and attorney fees and punitive damage. The case was filed in Trumbull County Court June 18th. Would you have troubles working in a community that had a significant Hispanic minority?
No, not at all. And let me address that in specificity. Back in 2018, there's a fellow in town who actually happened to be my landlord, and he had one of his staff people working over at the rental property where I was living. And I was introduced to a charming young man about age 25. His name was Jose Morales. And Jose said, "Hello, my name is Jose, and I'm working on my green card." He laughed about it, and Roy Clonch, the property owner who hired him as a staff person, laughed about it as well. From that point forward, I had different interactions with Jose, a very self-effacing young man, very charming and very likable. And I had a pretty good relationship with Jose, but this was part of his shtick. Introduce himself to people, say, "Hey, I'm Jose, I'm working on my green card." We all knew he wasn't working on his green card, and that was part of his self-effacing shtick. And then what happened after that was I introduced all the people that worked on a city cleanup program. And throughout that entire time, I'd never been given Jose's last name. I just knew him as Jose, and everybody on city council knew him, and everybody in the community knew him. And so we handed out these awards. I introduced Jose. I said he's working on his green card. The members of city council laughed about that. That's on the video. And everybody in the community knew Jose, knew about his shtick. Much to my shock and chagrin, then this news report comes out, and as a result of that, Jose files this lawsuit that you talked about. I prepared information from the other people that knew that this was an inside joke with Jose. I told him I was sorry. I should have repeated the inside joke, but certainly no harm was intended because he's really a great young man. In any case, we provide that information to the court, and Jose dismissed the lawsuit. Nobody paid a dime. I don't know where Jose is now these days, but it was bad judgment on my part, certainly. But in Newton Falls, everybody has known Jose, and I think he's moved out of town since that time. But it's a great young man, came from a great family. Where the lawsuit came completely from out of left field. The city council, as I mentioned, was sort of part of the joke at the time, and they certainly didn't take any action, or there was nothing else done about it. As I mentioned, the lawsuit has gone away. The next time somebody tells me about their own inside shtick, obviously I need to exercise some better judgment, but you know, I'm a person of faith, and I believe in treating all people of all colors, races, and creeds with the deepest of respect, and especially making sure that people that are in a situation where they need some respect and understanding in particular, we should do that. Remember, I'm the guy that hired the first minority in the police department that never had any whatsoever. So I have a good track record in that regard.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lynch. That's my questions.
Thank you. Now, what questions do you have for us?
I'm sorry?
What questions do you have for us?
Yes, I do. I believe in transparency. One of the other themes of all the different questionnaires I saw that came from the candidates was the concept of transparency. in government. It seemed to be a regular drumbeat. But I was going on your website, and maybe I missed something. It looks, I couldn't find video of more recent council meetings. Have you guys stopped that, or is it on an alternate place? What's going on in that regard?
We do keep videos. Generally, we send people to the YouTube channel because that's where the videos are streamed. Usually, it takes a while for them to get up onto the website.
Okay.
Videos when they go up on the website as well.
Okay, I was on the city's website. The other thing is, what I did see on the videos that were there is, you know, accessibility is also part of transparency. And the audio quality is not great. You know, I guess the only thing I would ask is if there are some plans to do something to upgrade the accessibility of the audio of some of those meetings, just so that people can understand what's going on a little better.
Yeah, we do. We have a $6,500 grant from the State Internet Portal Authority, and we are going to be installing the OWL system. One of our trustees has completely investigated it. He's the one that's currently in the hospital, but we have given all his information to staff, and they're going to go ahead and buy the system and get it installed. So yeah, we realize this definitely needs to be improved.
Sure. Another question I had to do with a form of your government, your statutory community. Has ever been consideration given to becoming a home rule community? Because generally, my experience has been that you've got the ability to control your fate a little bit better when you're home rule community.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, they get bandied about it from time to time. Nobody's ever taken it on. People say, yeah, the option would be better, but it would take a big effort to make this a home rule community versus statutory one. We have to get to the people and we have to get a vote on it. And then we have to jump through all the hoops to happen. And there just hasn't been a big enough upswell in the community.
Okay.
And I have a little bit to add to that. In Colorado, if you were home rule in the past, you had additional revenue streams available to you. They've ended that. So a lot of communities who would have gone for home rule, you know, as you said, there's a little bit more legislative control, but some of the benefits have gone away.
Okay. I also had a question with reference to your trash pickup system. I could not tell from looking at your budget. Are you picking up the refuse in your community with your own employees?
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay. And by the way, I fully support of municipal employees, but a number of communities throughout the country have ended up doing some privatization of that sort of thing, whether it's with Browning Ferris or Waste Management or some of these other organizations that are out there. Did anybody ever do a cost analysis in that regard?
Rick, you want to answer?
Yes. We've done a cost analysis in the past, and again, the two waste management companies in the area are significantly more expensive than what we charge for ours. Again, our budget is slightly underfunded, but we still are well under what the other two small companies can handle, and they're pretty much at capacity in my what I've heard. They'd have to expand in order to be able to pick up the town as well. One of our problems is our landfill is about 35 miles away, and it is a community landfill, and it's nearing the end of its life. Sometime in the next 10 or 15 years, I believe it's going to end. The next landfill will be a regional landfill, and probably in Mesa County. And we're probably talking somewhere in the range of 70 miles to that one. We can't afford to build. And so this is an ongoing problem. We'll see how we can get this to go. It's complex. There's a lot of complexity to it.
Sure. And one other question I wanted to ask, if I could, Trustee Stelter, sort of related to these utilities that we've been talking about, and that is broadband. One of the things that has been happening throughout the country is with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's so much infrastructure money that's going to be available out of Washington. And I noticed that in some of the different questionnaires, or rather in your city budget report, there's quite a bit of editorial content talking about how much broadband can mean to expansion of the economy and bringing jobs to the community and that sort of thing. If you looked at the idea of, there's a very dynamic concept that's happening right now, and that's the establishment of a municipal utility in broadband. In other words, you've already got water and you've already got sewer. And the idea of establishing a municipal utility in broadband, because the commercial entities spend an awful lot of money on advertising and promotion and that sort of thing. And with all this money coming out of Washington, it can do two things. One is you can give cheaper broadband to people throughout your community, and you can sell that broadband service to outside of your community on a regional basis. And you generate, and in addition to that, it becomes a revenue producer. And I didn't know if that's the sort of thing that had been talked about before, because if you fund something like that with revenue bonds, you're not exposing the full faith and credit of the community. It's actually the bonds are paid off by the revenue exclusively that's created. I don't know if
well, actually, our electric company invested in broadband quite a few years ago, and so we have high-speed internet and broadband in our community already, and we already have 2 providers in our community. So that's okay. We have three broadband providers in our community already. So we have broadband, and it has brought a lot of young remote workers into our community.
And then we have it's a regional co-op that runs our electric service, and our broadband access is direct fiber into the house. It's actually incredibly awesome.
Yes.
And really cheap, very affordable.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's unlikely that the town would do a municipal service.
No.
Sure. All right, and then just one last question. It has to do with something I noticed that I thought was a great idea, but I don't know if you've done it recently. It looks like a couple of years ago, there was sort of a retreat of the legislative body to kind of look at the master plan, see what issues you can identify, and then come up with sort of a program to follow. Has that been done again recently? Or are you planning on something like that?
It hasn't been done since I've been on the board, and that's since 2018. We did do a community strategic planning session in June of 2022. And no, we don't have anything planned at this point in time.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know if any of the questions that I've indicated create any other questions on your end. One thing we didn't talk about very much was economic development. And I also think that's a key role for the city administrator to spend some time in. Obviously, a good deal of your revenue is coming from sales tax. And in fact, one of the introductory elements of your audit report talks about a tension between providing service to the residents under a situation in which you've got more and more services coming that you want to provide to your residents, but seeing the tension between that residential activity versus commercial. And I do think that if you take a look at my record, sort of economic development, it's key to form a relationship with your businesses on an ongoing basis that are already there, and also reaching out to all the different projects. You know, there are some databases that you can subscribe to where there are companies that are looking for a place on a project by project basis. And as a city administrator, part of my job would be to reach out to those that might be appropriate, inform the legislative body, of course, but see if you can find a match by tapping into those databases. There are companies expanding these days, and I think it can make a significant difference in Paonia.
Okay, thank you. Well, at this point, we will be interviewing 8 semifinalists. So we have one more, and then our interviews will be finished. we will be deliberating tomorrow morning and choosing our finalists at that point. And so we will be informing you relatively quickly after that as to if you are one of our finalists or not.
Sure.
So, if you are chosen as a finalist, your name, your cover letter, and your resume, of course, will be from the public. And I'm assuming you will agree to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Of course, your letters of reference, your medical, psychological, and sociological data are not open to public review under Colorado law. In addition, the finalists will be asked to consent to a background check, which will include a credit history. And we'll agree to that.
Sure, of course.
Okay, all right. So we will be in touch with you, hopefully sometime in the next couple of days to let you know whether you are a finalist or not. And of course, we thank you very much for your time and taking some time to interview with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you.
Delighted. It was nice meeting all of you. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thank you.
Good day.
bye-bye.
Okay, so, in my background checking, I spoke of racism and sex. The flag is part of there is an identity symbol. So here, this is, I just want to give you one little quote. Letter to the editor. This is with respect to the articles he wrote for the paper. While reading his articles on occasion, I observed the hint of his homophobic sentiments in more than one of his homophobic videos. Usually he alludes to the fact that he finds the gay community distasteful and resents seeing a gay couple in print ads for popular clothing stores. I was happy to see he finally grew up here and voiced his bigotry in crystal clear statements. He stated that same-sex marriage is a threat to the well-being of children, and those children deserve the benefit of being raised in a quote, wholesome, unquote, heterosexual environment. How insulting to imply that families that do not have a male-female structure will not raise their children in a wholesome atmosphere.
Yeah, he didn't answer some of the questions. He walked around it and did all this hyperbole and didn't answer questions.
To his credit, when I got him on, like, the reason why he got law was, to be honest about it.
Yeah.
In other words, he didn't try to lie.
All right. No. Or a salesman.
Just that, his financial capabilities and development, probably, that's what we really needed. Suffice, but I don't think his. I don't see his outlook as a strong match for us, as a community. But while we're on the topic, I kind of feel like Dave's comment in our last meeting was way more racist than what this guy said.
Oh, that Dave had no idea that the gentleman was black or gay.
That bullshit.
He did not. He hadn't seen the picture. He had no idea. None.
Okay.
Well, as you wish, Thomas, you know.
No, I wish he hadn't said that, is what I wish. Said what?
I can't even remember the exact words.
I looked at it again, because that's what I heard, and that's what he said.
He used the word
And you got
COVID.
it hilarious, by the way.
But I didn't take it that I didn't take it that way either, but he's not here to defend himself.
Right, so I think we should let it go. You want to take this up to Dave?
No, I'm gonna take it up with Nick, actually. This is what I'm gonna take it up with, and Dave. But if this guy's comment disqualifies him, which I feel like it. Yeah, I know. I mean, really, we don't need more attention in the community. We need a uniter.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
What I see is he's pretty much a cheerleader for massive development. What really raised the hair on the back of my neck was his thing that the city bought a piece of property and gave it to a developer, commercial developer. And that right there, that's beyond, you just can't do that kind of thing. And tax abatement for multiple years too. I've seen that I've seen it go really south, really fast. And I really oppose that kind of thing.
Leslie?
Well, the word that came to me was glib. Just a short 4-letter word. I don't think he's a fit. I think he's been living large and been in charge, and I think it's going to be hard for him to adjust to an administrator role where he has to take a back seat. I also I was put off by his explanation of the interaction with the Hispanic gentleman. It just did not set with me well. So I just don't think he's a fit. I don't,
Right.
I would rather take a chance on a young guy that's not been town administrator before than to get somebody like him that may not be able to adjust to the town.
Right.
I would agree. Yeah, I don't think he would fit well with this town. Yeah, culturally or anything else. Yeah, agreed.
And I think he'd be disappointed because our focus is not economic development at
No,
this point. We gotta make sure people have water to drink.
right.
And we have the infrastructure.
Stand slinging.
And Paige, correct?
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but is this the guy that led with, the first sentence was professional decision maker?
Our last person coming up did.
Oh,
We're about
okay.
to interview, right? It's hard to keep them all straight.
I know.
But no, Miles, professional decision maker with 35 years of progressive management and leadership experience is who we're about to interview.
Right.
Yeah, I was put off by that because you don't want your administrator should not think of themselves as a decision maker. They should decision implementer.
That's it.
Yeah, well, I was put out.
Okay.
Resume, beginning with all those capital letters and colored font. It's like.
I know. John and I talked about that and kind of consensus was, well, let's still just see who he is. Yeah, I thought that was the worst resume I've ever seen. Yeah.
I'm going to step away for a moment and I'll be right back.
Thanks, Lily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it's for somebody who comes off as being so professional, it's not a professional resume.
If they can't take that.
I was shocked by it, actually.
Yeah,
But-
no, man.
Yeah,
That's a-
when the three of us
my
saw
kind of
it.
background.
And by the way, I should let you know that, what was the gentleman's
that's
name
softball.
when we interviewed last time? Didn't tell us about what happened in Nevada? Oh, yeah, absolutely. He applied again. In the start, and I made sure Leslie understood why we did not wanna, because he looks really good on paper. So just, and I forgot, I have written everyone back that we didn't interview and let them know. I forgot to write Dennis Stark. That's what made me think of it today, because all of a sudden I went, oh, I emailed him. But I emailed all the others and said, thank you, but you weren't chosen for an interview with me. And we used to call them BFO letters, But I know very nice.
So remind me, so the process is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we're gonna get together and then we start decision tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Yes, and today,
Today we just have one more.
yeah, and we're not talking about how we're gonna continue the process. That's tomorrow at 10 as well, right? Our executive session is just that today, right?
Right,
So 10 o'clock, we'll talk about scheduling and all that. Okay,
right.
Yeah, Sam said that she had discussed it in today's agenda just in case we wanted to have some.
Yeah.
did she, and I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I just want to review the.
Yeah, I didn't know, yeah, in terms of scheduling. Once we choose scheduling, we should be done as a group, so we get as many people available for the in-person interviews as possible.
Well, we should all do it.
Yeah. I just want you to know I'm gonna be gone at the end of March, this month. Second loss.
Leslie's gone.
So I'll email you.
Oh, that's right, you're gonna be on Christmas.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Some people, they walk immediately. and
Yeah.
are in minimal pain. And some people are in agonizing pain and crippled.
Yeah, but they make you get up, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And mine is gonna be a little bit different because I've had so many surgeries on it. They have to cut around the scar tissue. So I'm gonna have it longer
Yeah.
and wider.
But you're getting a whole new need.
Yes, complete appliance. Not the half.
Not a big cat. No, it makes my stomach me too. I'm so not good at this medical stuff.
Just cut off.
It's beyond my knowledge.
That's true. They can't hurt it.
Yeah.
No, it's- And then they do the grinding. Oh, and they're gonna grind it back. And put plastic on it. So-
Oh, okay, so you're, yeah,
It's.
custom,
Yeah.
custom kneecap.
The kneecap, give you the other joint.
There was plastic on the back. Because it's pretty severely arthritic. Over all the time. He said, we went over it, he said, I don't think that, I wanna give you an artificial kneecap because I've had problems with over the time. And he says, I want this to last 20 years, I said, I'm not gonna last.
You never know.
It's not a.
It's not.
Rick, did you have a chance to look through the YouTube videos of our last set of interviews?
I have not yet.
They were pretty well.
I have to get the link. Because that's not on.
Yeah, this.
I gotta talk to Sam.
Yeah.
It's, we had some really good people.
Some of the resumes that I went through, I was impressed with a couple of them. I was very impressed with a couple. And, I'd like to see their interviews. And that would be next. That's what I'm doing
Can you,
tonight.
oh, okay, and you asked them to give them to you.
I'll ask.
Yes, did Dave make arrangements?
Huh?
Did Dave make
Yeah.
arrangements to get these two?
Right.
But you need to look at
I need
four. Just eat some popcorn
glass of bourbon. No. I don't want to be completely out of the loop.
No.
and you want it.
Oh, no.
I want to
you need see
be,
them.
I want to have some education.
Yep.
This was very educational. I had a few questions about Mr. Lynch. I went and did a internet search as well and found what you had mentioned and a little more. So, you know,
No.
Oh, there's someone in the waiting room, are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Last man standing. Oh, look at this. Yeah. We were waiting to be on this for a little while longer.
you just don't take your gun.
And another older question, metal fragments.
I've got three 3-inch screws and a chunk of metal and having my fingers. Do they know? Oh, yeah. It shows like all the whole kneecap just blows. Like, amazing. So MRIs are not.
Yeah, I've had it before. It's too.
I just fall asleep.
Miles, can you hear us?
All right, we can't hear you. Unmute.
I got to unmute. There we go.
And as long as you stay on. All right. So I am Mayor Backren, and I'm gonna let the other council members go around and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Paige Smith, trustee. I believe we've spoken.
Yes, ma'am. Rick Stelter, trustee.
Steve Long. Dave Weber, off-screen trustee.
And I'm Leslie Klusmeyer. I'm the interim town administrator.
And then, all right, and we've got one trustee in the hospital, unfortunately, who cannot join us, and then another trustee who is have another meeting and can't join us. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna go around and we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions, and then we're gonna give you an opportunity to ask us some questions. All right? All right.
So Miles, to start off, what attracted you to this position?
What attracted me to this position?
Yes.
Well, we've kind of been looking to move back to Colorado sometime. And when I saw the advertisement of quirky, wholesome, that sort of stuff, that actually grabbed my attention. I went to school at the Air Force Academy, did another tour there. My wife and I live there. We have family in Colorado, but I don't necessarily enjoy the Front Range, too many people. So we're looking for somewhere deeper. The kids are now pretty much gone out of the house, in college or beyond. So it's that point of life where my wife and I are starting to look someplace where we want to go and make home. So again, I'm an economic development director. I was a career Air Force officer. I'm not looking for a town administration of a town of 10,000. I'm looking for someplace I can make a difference, but stay. Just kind of looking for a home for the future too. So.
Okay, thank you. So please describe your supervisory experience and style.
Supervisor experience and what? Sorry.
Style.
Again, I've 20 plus years in the Air Force. I was a pilot, which you do a small crew, where you trust in everybody that's on that crew, moving up through the ranks of operations and controlling, managing different amounts of people, situations. The last I had in the military was in the underground at Offutt Air Force Base, working with both military and civilian from all services. In this job that I'm currently an economic development director, I do not supervise anybody directly, but I work with all the utility guys across the board because that's what it takes to do the job of which I'm in. There is no title for assistant city administrator in Central City, but the city administrator has called me that many times as he's a lot on different boards, and so I take in and fill in and answer and make decisions on that. As far as my style, I'm one to get involved, not micromanagement. I'm the type that will prefer to provide the tools for the people to use, and then ask them to do the project, give them the description, and let them do it. Not micromanage and tell them the way to accomplish. I just grew up in a world where you're expected to do what you're asked to do and do it with integrity and speed and that. So that's what I expect of others, and usually that's how it works. At the same time, those people I worked with who need something to make something happen aren't afraid to ask me for that model to continue.
Thank you. What can you bring to the role of managing a small town municipal government?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. What can you bring to the role of managing a small town municipal government like us?
Well, I come from a family. I grew up in a smaller town in Nebraska, probably about 5,000 back then, with my father as a public works superintendent, my mother as a city clerk. So I grew up with sewers and parks and everything else at the table. Then when we retired from the Air Force, if you want to call it that, moved back here to raise the kids. I've been involved in city government. I've sat city council ever since we moved here, before I even had to work for the city. I think interaction with both the council, in your case, the trustees, but also the public as a whole. I'm not one to, I'm one more to listen and welcome people to sit at my desk and have a conversation. and get out and get involved in activities. So I think that was part of it. And then at the same time, accounting for the people that you work with to do the same, to earn the trust of the people. I have lots of schooling in management, economic development. I do a lot of grant writing. I can bring that to your community. I've been trying to do a little research on your water issues, housing issues, that sort of things. We have some experience of the same here. I work heavily in housing development and community development.
Thank you. Give us an example of a time when you did not agree with the board or your direct managers, and how did you use your position to help find a solution?
As economic development director, I'm also the executive director of a 21-member board for the Development Corporation, and that brings quite a variety of board members to the table, and they all have their own opinion. Part of that is what will work, what will not, or the explanation of why or why not my thoughts something will work, but at the same time, my process is to listen to their possible solutions and open that view. And not everybody's right, and not everybody's got a clear picture, but once you find something, you got to make a decision and move on. Otherwise, you're never going to get it.
Thank you.
Can you give us an example of a time when you made an error which had a large impact, and what did you do to minimize the impact?
Whether it made an error?
Yes.
I try not to do that. I'm gonna have to think about that one for a little bit. It's easier to go hash stuff out beforehand, whether it be the city administrator and I sitting over a beer talking things over, or having the development corp, having a meeting or getting together on the side. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but you kind of, when you make a decision, you kind of run with it. But if it's not working, you got to be able to take a left, take a right, check another avenue. I'm not trying to be ignorant, but I can't really think of an error at this time that's made a severe impact on anything.
All right, please describe your experience with managing municipal water and sewer system.
In the city of Central City, which we live in, the city owns the water, sewer, the electrical, and the gas department. We have had issues with the water department water issue. All of our water comes from wells. And here we have nitrates and uranium in the water, so we have to keep those at certain levels. We keep the water guys up on, they all know those state requirements. We give them the funds to get their state qualifications and certifications. The biggest problem we had was a couple of years ago when we had a main break, and basically everybody ended up without water. And what happened on that one was that the water tower emptied through that break, and we discovered that the emergency system did not send out a signal. So ended up water the break, fixing the break. We have a system here called Code Red, which is an alert system through email or text, and we send that out. Facebook does wonders. You just get the word out not to use water, it'll be fixed. But we had to go to the point of boiling water, that sort of stuff. We know that by redoing our downtown system through some state grants, our water system was built basically between 1894 and 1904 through most of the town. All those are on a system to be fixed or maintained over time. We're currently without quite a few fire hydrants. But it's just a matter of managing, making people aware, what we can do and going down the system and try to fix it at one time. We all know there's not enough money to fix things, but at the same time, the development that we're doing, we're making sure those have enough shut-offs so that if there is a break in our system, we can actually section off a section of town and keep water within town, especially the business section, and not let the whole town go dry. So.
Okay, thank you. Please describe your,
Oh, I'm sorry. That's not bad.
This one.
I'll go ahead and finish. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Please describe your professional work experience related to project analysis and how you explain your analysis and recommendation to lay people.
I find it fairly easy to lay people to bring down. I don't say bring down, but just explain it. I try to do that to kids. My kids, they said, Dad used to be a teacher, but I spent a lot of time in the Air Force as a pilot, being an instructor. Part of that in the schoolhouse in Oklahoma, teaching new pilots in the plane to understand certain things or how they work or what they will do. But as far as people, as the citizens, if you just listen and try to understand, because the person on the right may understand it different than the person on the left, even if you explain it the same way. But if you listen and converse back and explain it at a level that, whether it be iron worker that may understand iron to the CPA that may understand a different way, the ability to explain something in those levels is what I attempt to do.
Thank you. Please describe your professional work experience with grant writing, grant contract management, and reporting. Specifically explain which elements you were directly responsible for.
Well, if you see dark circles around my eyes, that's because I'm on my second grant that I'm currently writing. I've written USDA grants for the Red Leg program, if you haven't heard of that, which is Rural Economic Development Loan and Grant Program. Written state grants for downtown redevelopment. And currently I'm on my second one of the year, $1 million housing grants. Written one for the city, one for the, I'm currently one for the Development Corp, which is due this week. And that's why the darkness around my eyes. Analyzing two things, I guess. One is what the grant process calls for, meaning you answer every question. And the other one is what you want them to know. So your situation is hopefully a little bit different than every other situation, every other community that's putting it in for the grant. So like currently the current one is the low unemployment rate, the lack of workforce housing, the inability to hire a workforce because of the limited housing issue that we have here, and be able to explain that with data such as unemployment rates or Department of Labor numbers, that sort of stuff. It just really depends what the grant is for. Done some community development grants, and then administering the grant paperwork issue. We do here, my experience here is being the middleman when we hire out administration, the development district to handle some. Other ones are annual or semi-annual reporting, of which is more sticking numbers for the federal government that they need to know and handle that. But I handle all the finances for the development corporation, so it's kind of a mixture across the board because I work both with the city and the development corporation.
Thanks, Miles. Can you describe your experience with developing a budget and monitoring that budget throughout the fiscal year?
As far as the municipal budget, I've only worked with our own city administrator to go through that. I've done some studies on it through ICMA. My budget process, besides the own companies that I've owned, small business, is budgeting for the development corp for the year, and this grant that's coming up that I'm putting in for developing a budget. And then you also have to explain how you're going to track the budget, monitor the budget, and that sort of stuff. I know that's short word, but that's I sit at every council meeting. I go through the budget. I look at the budget. I do not have a say other than putting in my own request. But I also do explain how the departments also need, like if they need a bucket truck for the electrical department, try to persuade them to figure out what they need now, and knowing that $140,000 truck is going to take some time to budget, so we need to get it in 2 or 3 years ahead of schedule so we can budget that down the road.
How have you handled a situation when a person you directly supervise has made a serious mistake?
Well, that really depends if it's the first time or continual. If it's the first time, stop the bleeding. If it's a serious mistake, you got to fix or stop what it is right now, and then figure out why it happened. If it's a lack of training, a lack of safety procedures, lack of equipment, learn that first, and then proceed to do what we can to fix that. If it's just pure deliberate act, it's time to let it go. Time to move on. If it's a deliberate act that wasn't done, then it's time to have a serious conversation and do that. Otherwise, if it's something that happened but can't be fixed and learn from, if no one's injured or property's injured, then you can learn from it and move on.
Thank you.
So describe a difficult work situation or project and how you were able to overcome it.
Difficult project or situation? Is that what
A difficult work situation or a particular work project and how you were able to overcome the difficulty.
Well, within my current job, main difficult situations is dealing with people, and people have the way they think it should be done and the way it is done, and it's not necessarily that it's wrong either way, but it's just the choice that was made. So it's taking the time to actually sit down with the opposition, if you will, and explain why, and the understanding that you will consider their way next time. Most of our situations have been something that needs to be taken care of in a short order, whether it be pouring sidewalks, making water lines, making a decision. In order, you need to keep it going. It's you don't want to hold up a project in order to do that. And you need to keep going. The other thing I do is we try to document it. Meaning, if you're working with a contractor or even personnel, if the problem doesn't get fixed over time, it needs to be documented so you can do something about it in the long run, rather than just saying, "I told you to say," and they say, "No, you don't," or the contractor said, "No, you said that way," but at the same time, you have proof that, documentation that you didn't. So. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Sort of.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us, Mom?
Dave,
Yes, Mr. McGinnis, I saw your work on the Central City 2012 Comprehensive Plan as an economic director, and we're undergoing a master plan change to our last one's quite old, 1996. This year we're on it. I did notice you didn't have a whole lot of town administrator experience, but you were the deputy city administrator for a while. What did you run into for problems or accomplishments while you were deputy?
Well, again, it's more, I guess, dealing with people. When you're working with the comprehensive plan, you have all walks, everyone, you invite entire town to come and give opinions and try to work through the process. But you also have to see the goal. So it's the explanation of getting from A to Z there to convince the working of that. Part of our issues, especially in this time, has been housing. The big problem that we had to work through is downtown renovation. When you tear up an entire street of sidewalks in front of the businesses and try to keep them operating, that's an issue. But when they understand that you're working with them, whether we work with the contractor to build even plywood planks to get to the door, or notify townspeople that, hey, for 2 days we're going to be using the back door to get in places. It's a matter of, to me, communication to get through problems. Those are like two of the major. The downtown project, where we tore up about 4 city blocks, including the state highway that runs through the town, and just some housing issues with development or developers to get the contractors to do the work to make things happen. And development reasons we've had, when I first, in that time frame, was also, I entered a position where the Development Corp was $1.7 million in debt, digging a hole that they couldn't get out of. But they were sitting on situations that just needed a decision made and take that. And we took property, either broke those apart or split them apart, sold and tried to recoup and pay back, getting out of the loans that were there. But also taking issues where a business has a CDBG with the city involved. You literally just have to say, if they're going under, how do you cut the losses and make that issue happen, instead of trying to drag it along, but actually having those conversations. And if they get real, well, you get the legal involved, unfortunately, but that's sometimes what you have to do just to keep the process documented and moving along.
So in your research on the town of Paonia and your skills as an economic director, what would you recommend for economic development for Paonia?
Well, the water issue, the tap issue, is something when I'm reading and listening to it, seems to be an issue of expansion or growth. From what you read on the internet, Paonia is a wonderful community with businesses, manors, restaurants, and it's not just in town, but the Grand Avenue seems to be the place, but it's all the surrounding valley and those. The other issue is, from what I see in my research, is housing. When even looking at the possibility of this job, seeing what the cost of a house available at the current time is there in order to move into. But it goes back to that water issue, which I see if you're going to build housing or going to build a business which needs taps, how do you move forward with doing that in order to make that happen? It's kind of hard to do that. So kind of got to figure that hurdle first. The next one was how would you fund things, whether it be incentives for businesses, even the festivals and stuff, which bring a lot of people to town. Can you take advantage of that? Some communities are able to bring in enough revenue in a short period of time to carry them through 6 months to 12 months out of the year. That's one way to, I think, capitalize that. I understand the coal business has gone away, which is a hurt, but it's also try to figure out what kind of opportunity can be used with that, which I haven't really thought about it. But there, in my world, it's kind of like, how do you turn a bad situation into something you can recoup or come back from, or turn it into a different situation?
Thank you, Mr. McGinnis. Those are my questions.
All right, sir. Oh, thank you. Now, you are our last preliminary candidate that we are into. So tomorrow morning, you're going to get together and go through all our interviews and determine who will be our finalists. So we will be being notified in the next couple of days as to if you are a finalist or not.
Question.
Mary, did you want to give him a
2
chance
minutes
to
out.
ask?
Yeah.
He didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any questions for us?
Does he have any questions?
I actually wrote I have a couple questions, mainly what the advertisement and the just reading about the political strife, the personal attacks. Do you see that still existing or changing, or is that, you know, the openness or conversation, is it getting better than it was a year or 2 years ago?
I believe it definitely has been. It, yeah, as one of our board members is has a long history of being in personnel and that kind of thing. He has always said the best way to bring a team together is to have them do a task together and succeed in that. And actually doing 2 rounds of interviews and hiring our interim town administrator has really brought the board together in a lot of ways. And that a lot of that contention has dropped away. So it has become much less contention and has gotten a lot better over the last 6-8 months.
Where I've tried to do, you guys seem to record everything on YouTube, the whole meetings. We don't do that here. It's hard to review all the meetings to try to find specific situations, try to read through the minutes, find some stuff, but it's understandable that those are minute. I do have 2 other questions. One would be, how can I make a difference if I was to come there? My experience in integrity and openness and conversation, is that a benefit, or is that something you're looking for? Or what are you looking for in the person to make a difference along with the administration on a daily basis?
Want me to tackle that one?
Go for it.
So, let's see. Let me back up a little bit as to why our strife is so much less too. And that is because for several years, we had one person being administrator and town clerk, which is too much for one person to do. So we have now separated. We now have a town clerk and we're looking for a town administrator. And as a consequence of one person trying to do so much, the trustees weren't always given the best information in the agenda packets and to make decisions from. The code wasn't necessarily being followed, which caused strife with citizens, which then put a lot of stress on the trustees and their interactions with citizens, et cetera. So from my perspective, one of the things that is huge in the town of Paonia is that the code be followed by the town administrator. It's not, make a decision and then go back and check and make sure it's okay with the code. And that was being done to some extent, so. And that, of course, transparency is good too, but in all honesty, our code needs quite a bit of update. And not just codification, but content. Our land use section is specifically really needs to be rectified because we have inconsistencies across chapters, definitions, and things like that. So the person coming in has to be ready to do a wholesale look at our code and make sure that it's as good as it could be and it's getting to what the town wants for its long-term goals. So I'll leave that. I'll let other people chime in on other pieces of the big picture.
Yeah, I would say that, Miles, that your greatest contribution, if 10 years from now, if we're looking back and we say, wow, Miles did a great job, the one thing that really stands out is the water system. The water infrastructure has been not quite right. Neglect is the wrong word because it's been addressed, but it hasn't been comprehensively managed. It's been kind of piecemeal and Band-Aids and what we can do at the time. And a lot of it has to do with administration, having the funds available, grants availability. There's all kinds of factors that go into it. But at the end of the day, in Colorado, and I'm sure you're familiar with Nebraska as well, the water is the fundamental aspect of what builds this town. And fortunately, we've addressed it and recognized it very directly with our moratorium. So, we won't be able to, and I know that there is an assumption that eventually we will release the moratorium. Personally, I don't know if that's going to be true or not. Withholding judgment until the engineers say their piece, but we won't be able to close that or have an answer for it until our infrastructure is at its full capacity. Until we have everything ready to go and upgraded, and it's working as it's intended to. The rest of it won't be able to fall into place. That's in my mind. That's all.
Okay, and that's kind of confirmed what I thought I was reading in a little bit of how it is. Because the other question, the last one I had was, I couldn't find a necessarily a written structure of. I know somewhere I read about quote chain of command, which I don't necessarily use since I've been out of the military, but the city administrator working with the department heads, or is there a structure in Peonia with how that goes? I could not find that anywhere.
Yeah, we do have a chain of command, and the town administrator supervises all the staff heads, the board of directors, supervises the police chief, the judge, the town administrator, and the town attorney, basically a firing on those. And then the town administrator takes care of everything else.
Okay. Well, I thank you for the opportunity to explain that to me.
Okay, well, obviously I have been doing this, need to go home and take a nap.
I can't.
And probably basically about and let you know if you're one of our finalists. So that if you are chosen finalist, I'm sorry?
You're fading out. I can't hear you.
Again. If you are chosen finalist, your name, cover letter, and resume will then become public information. Will you agree to that?
I'm sorry, but it's going in and out when you're speaking. So.
Oh dear, somebody's losing their connection.
There, I can.
All right.
If I do it to make it true.
Let me put the terms in the chat. How about that? Can I do that?
I can hear you when you're speaking down, but not when you're speaking up. I'm sorry.
Then I'll speak down. That if you're chosen as a finalist, your name, cover letter, and resume will become public information. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Letters of reference, medical, psychological, and sociological data concerning a finalist are not open to public review according to Colorado law. Okay, in addition, the finalists will be asked to consent to a background check, and that includes a credit history.
Okay.
All right, so we will be in touch in a couple of days to let you know if you're a finalist or not, and then we'll go from there.
All right.
All
Again,
right.
thank you for the opportunity and
Oh, thank you for taking time to meet with us, Mr. McGinnis. It's been a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
nice to meet you all.
Bye, Miles.
Bye-bye.
Right, but. Oh, she make a good minister.
I do get it, you know, understanding this role of the trustees and that, you know, we're elected and we have to serve the citizens and.
Yeah, I did a real top down here. Yeah.
That's the one thing I saw, that he's been a lieutenant colonel for a while, and that shows. He likes to make the decisions. I don't know that that probably will fit with us. I'm also a little leery about his development corporation mentions that this seems to be his focus. Development and development and development. And that's kind of leery for us because basically that's the last thing that's going to happen here. And it's probably 10 years down the line, if at all.
Right, fits exactly my research. Yeah, I get the sense that is pretty sharp and pretty organized, but doesn't have town management experience, you know, and I feel like he would rely on his military background as a basis for management. And I just don't think that would fly with the folks that we have on hand, you know, it's not a military operation. I'm not saying. Gaining efficiency and capability, I think that having somebody with more town management or you know, nearby experience, your town management experience would be preferable. Basically, I see other candidates that are a bit careful. He does have a really clean background. No one's like gonna dig up any dirt at all.
Leslie?
Well, I think if 4 of the candidates pulled out, he could do the job. You know, I think because he has municipal experience, he's strong. I think he's probably strong on grant writing. I don't know about water and sewer or land use. You know, if he does USDA grants, those are more complicated. So, you know, that's a skill set you would get, but he seems kind of low key to me compared to others. So, I mean, I think he'd be okay, but I think you've got 4 really strong candidates.
I would agree as well.
I agree.
Okay. Then we're going to close out the executive session. This meeting adjourned. All right. I hereby attest that this recording reflects the actual contents of the discussion at the executive session and has been made in lieu of any written minutes to satisfy the recordings of the open meetings law. I'll hand the tape to the town administrator to retain for a 90-day period. Time is now 4:10 p.m. The executive session is returned to the open meeting. Now, this recording is